Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the RENNSPORT community events. And today we are in Spa-Francorchamps for 2 hours of racing with the Hypercar category alongside the GT3s on track. We have a lot of Porsches, which I think is to be expected with those cars, and right now in qualifying. I'm not alone here today, as per usual. Alongside me in the virtual booth that at least is Tim Ireland.
Hey Lino, hello everyone on Twitch. Yeah, we've got a bit of a different race today than we have normally do. So it's 2 hours at Spa. We've got hypercars, we've got GT3s. There's a lot of Porsches because that's the free hypercar right now. And even some Vantages, which is cool because we've not seen a Vantage in a while.
Yeah, definitely. We do have a good mix of cars in the end of it, and a lot of cool looking liveries as well. But yeah, of course, the big topic will be the different types of cars, hypercars, GT3s alongside. You see that a lot nowadays in different racing series, such as IMSA, which is starting later today, or the 6-hour Spa in the WC yesterday. Maybe a bit of foreshadowing for today, who knows? But what's definitely different to the WC is that every driver in qualifying is on their own here. So while we can see all the cars on track, they have clean air. They don't have to worry about any traffic. Or a big lockup there for one of our 963s. And there's one of our advantages. 2 we have in total for this race. So yeah, it will be very interesting how this race develops. 2-hour race, as you said. Definitely a very different kind of challenge, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially for the hypercar drivers. For people who don't know, hypercars do not have ABS. So it's a challenging thing to drive at the best of times, but for 2 hours where you really need to look after your tires, it becomes like a whole nother level of challenge. So it'll be super interesting, I think, watching the hypercars and see how the different drivers deal with their tires and look after them. And on top of that, they've then got to get around all the GT3 drivers, which we've got some pretty quick guys here today, so they're not going to be any slouches. And there's definitely going to be some racing going on that's going to cause a few hiccups for the hypercars getting past.
Yeah, it's a very interesting mix of drivers here today. We have a couple of names we definitely know and recognize, but we also have lots of people we don't or we haven't seen much before, if at all. But in practice, it seemed like some of those would be very interesting for the race as well, so we could have a few dark horses. Usually we have our, let's say, known set of drivers, where a lot of people are not racing here today, unfortunately, but they are being replaced by new gunners. So let's see what they can do. We have a pack of 4 here driving up now to Blanchimont. So I think it will be very, very interesting to what these guys can do, especially against the veterans we know, like an Enrico Boaniga and Mark Onimachi in the Hypercar, or Kimi Hapler in the GT3s. But we have the first few lap times coming in. Gok Polassa the first across the line with the 202.5 in the BMW. And then we have our group of GT3s. In total we have 10 minutes of qualifying, so you should be able to get 3 laps in without any problems. And Kimi Hapler the fastest of the GT3s. Bit of spin for our Grammy. We are being asked for race predictions by a certain Tim Schroeder. I'm not sure that this is a good idea.
Predictions generally don't go, or it doesn't go well for the predictee. For us, we have a very good ability to curse people with our predictions. I think Tim Schroeder is going to win his next 5 races. That's my prediction.
There you have it, Tim. You've asked for it. Now deliver. One thing that's for me very cool to see is Kokpolosa still with a 4 hypercar setting in lap time in the lead in the BMW. He's had a bit of a hiatus for quite some time, and he's back since yesterday. And today in the hypercar, we know he really likes this car, especially the BMW. And he is very good in the car as well. So it's nice to see him back and being competitive with it. It will be interesting to see what Mark Onimachi can do. And also Rowan Hood, who is also in this class, both with the 963.
Yeah, Rowan's been pushing pretty hard in qualifying, so he's not set a valid lap just yet. But I know Corpo has been doing a lot of practice before this event. He definitely does enjoy driving the hypercar, and he was one of the first to kind of put his name in the hat for driving the hypercars, which is always a fairly brave thing to do. But he's getting some good lap times right now, and the gaps between him, Julian Sakura, and Marco Namachi, who's just put a lap in, are pretty close.
Yeah, of course, the hypercar will also greatly differ in the race compared to now in qualifying, because you want to look after your tires more, you want to be more conservative, and you have to watch out for traffic a lot more. So those will all become factors very soon, because there's not too much time left in qualifying. Oh, and Marco Nimachi, that's what you not want to do in the race, because then you will have 4 nice flat spots, and no matter which wheelbase you have, it's not fun to drive with that for 1 hour and 30 straight.
No, the flat spots here in RENNSPORT are definitely something you can feel. I've said before about I've been a bit underwhelmed by flat spots in some other games, and I think RENNSPORT does a good job of showing that it's kind of harsh.
Yeah, it really takes a toll over time, especially. And once you have a flat spot, you're not getting back from it. It only gets worse from there, since flat spots breed flat spots. I think that's very widely known. But yeah, these guys in the GT3s, they don't have to worry about that. They have fancy ABS. Doesn't make the race any easier, if you want to say so. And it also seems to be quite competitive in the GT3s. Kimi Hapler has a bit of a gap to OG Stan, who is second in GT3, but then it's just Mark Koenig and Cesco Monera are not too far behind. And it seems like all GT3s that have set a lap time are within the 220s at least, which in the race then would be quite competitive over time, I think.
Yeah, there's a good group with Cescu Monera, Warwick Remy, Radoslav Pionkovic, and Gerardo Brescia, they're all pretty close together. So I'm looking forward to some good fighting on track with those guys.
People are getting their final laps and most have already parked their cars because they are not gonna get another lap in. Or Stan might get another lap in with this. Oh, and Rowan Hood goes quickest on his final attempt. Can Stan also improve? He does improve the time, but not the position. But Rowan Hood takes pole position in the hypercars. So in the final attempt, basically, he made it work. But yeah, that was qualifying. Rowan Hood alongside Gok Polassa on the front row in hypercar, with the GT3 front row being Kimi Harpler and OG Stan, followed by Mark Koenig, one of the new guys. And Cesco Munueva, who will, I think, be looking forward to make up some stuff from yesterday.
Yeah, an unlucky race yesterday at Nordschleife. But it's a fresh start, different track, different cars. So it's all wiped clean, and he gets another chance.
All the cars are getting ready for the race start. Will be rolling start. So, yeah, we will have 2 hours of racing to follow. I think that is a distance we haven't had in quite some time. And there we are coming towards the line. Rondenhood leading the pack. Kolosov fell a bit behind on that rolling start. And we go racing at the 2 hours of Spa here in RENNSPORT. And the GT3 field is also going there. But it's Rondenhood leading them down to Rouge, and Gokpolasa having to defend from Julian Checot there for second place. Oh, and with a very brave move into Rouge, defends the position. Rico Bräuniger in 7th. In the GT3s, it's Kimi Hapler and then Mark König, who made up a spot against OG Stan. See up front, pretty much single file for the GT3s. For the GT3s, Kimi Hapler has now to defend because Mark König's trying to go around the outside, and behind them, the 2 diamond liveried cars of OG Stan and Mathis Kirschring, who made up a lot of positions, are fighting for the 3rd spot. So very different approaches to this start of the race. Cesc Monuera down to 12th. That's then 5th in class. But up front, it's Rondenhood. Magonimachi here in 4th. But now Gokpolasa in pursuit of that Porsche 963, and it seems like he's already gaining time. Dennis Kurz, I think, dropped quite a few positions. He's behind Bojida Zelevskov.
The Hypercar's already stretching their legs out ahead of the GT3s there. You can see the kind of pace difference those guys are dealing with on the mini-map.
Yeah, I mean, the pace difference is about 15 seconds on a 2-minute 20 lap for GT3s. So, yeah, we can expect lapping maneuvers not too far into the future. Of course, the Hypercars will hope that the GT3 field has spread out by then a bit. Cesc Monuera trying a move on, or at least having a look on Mathis Kirschring. Seems like we have a couple of GT3s who also have a speeding penalty for the rolling starts. I see 3 people doing the drive through there. But in a 2-hour race, you can make that time up if you have the pace. Julian Checot now back on the bumper of Gokpolasa for 2nd in Hypercar. Seems like Bojida Zelevskov has lost a lot of time and therefore also positions. Might have been just a spin, because on his car there doesn't seem to be a scratch. So we have a few very big movers at the start of this race, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's all gone a bit crazy at the beginning. Not too bad, though. The Hypercars are quite predictably spread out a little bit. Driving these cars is hard enough at the best of times. Driving them right behind someone else is very, very tricky. It's difficult to judge how much downforce you're going to get.
It was a side-by-side moment for Gokpolas and Julien Chico in La Source. Couldn't quite complete the move, but even though it's only 4 minutes into the race, they are fighting for it. Now in the slipstream. Oh, and Julien Chico locked the brakes in front of Gokpolasa there, who didn't really quite have anywhere to go, I'd say, in that moment. You can't just emergency brake in those cars, it doesn't work. But Julien Chico locked the wheels, and that basically slid him a bit wide into the path of Gokpolasa, I'd say.
Yeah, I think one of the big downsides of not having ABS is in those like panic moments. It's so easy to just lock up. You need to keep your composure at all times with these things.
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes into the race, you have to think about whether you want to do moves like this or not. But, yeah, it was a bit of a weird incident.
And that's put Dennis Kurtzer right on the tailpipes of Julien Chico.
We can only hope that Julien Chico didn't suffer too big of a lockup there or tire damage in any other form. But with the hypercars, it will be, well, not difficult, but certainly interesting in the long run whether we see pit stops or not. Because the tire wear on these cars is different to the GT3s, which people are used to. Meanwhile, Marc Onimachi is in the pits to serve a drive-through for speeding on the start, as far as I know. Means Enrico Bräuninger already picked up 2 positions quietly without anybody really noticing.
That's the typical Enrico Bräuninger move. And also Dennis Kurtzer, who's now up to 4th. He likes to sneak his way quietly through the field throughout a race.
But it's also still a long way to go. I don't think that this will be close to the final order we see.
No, that's for sure.
Something that I'm really impressed by already is the pace from Mark Koenig. Because he's keeping it within 1.5 seconds of Kimi Hapler. He has OG Stan about a second behind him as well, so these 3 are not too far behind each other. They have a bit of a gap to now 4th place in class Cesco Munuera.
Bordajah Zelikov looks like he's had a bit of an off-track moment and he's desperately trying to limp back as safely as possible.
Yeah, there in the background you can see the car limping.
He's not looking like a happy hypercar.
So is the Aston Martin of Robert Gramey, because he picked up both left rear and heavy frontal damage. Losing quite some time on the straight, so this car definitely doesn't have the ideal drag coefficient.
Oh! And Bordajah Zelikov just got little tap on the side as Mark Onimachi, I think it was, went past. And then he got his rear splitter stuck on the curb. He's moving again, but it's even less of a Porsche 963 than it was. He's done so well getting it this far back. He really wants to get into the pits and fix that car up.
But it seems like it doesn't turn.
No, I think he may be in a fairly terminal condition right now, which is very unfortunate for him.
I mean, it's definitely...
Even full lock, it's barely going right.
It's definitely very unfortunate this early into the race. I mean, there's no other way to put it. We can see the 17 slowly moving. He also has to be wary about the cars coming up because we have Matthias Kirschwing defending from Radoslav Pironkiewicz for 11th, and a couple more GT3s just in the tow of them. And there we see, yeah, it's not really going anywhere where he wants to go.
No. He's trying, bless him. He's so close. Once you get a bit close to the pit lane, the walls will do the steering for you.
Meanwhile, in the GT3 field, Kimi Hapler has really stretched his legs last lap because 4-second gap to OG Stan and Mark Koenig has lost the position in quite some time, so he must have had definitely an incident because there's a chunk of the rear wide bumper missing from his car.
Just got into the pit lane, but now he's sideways across the pit entry. Oh, I'm very sorry.
Oh, big.
It's funny to watch.
Oh, and Cesco Monreiro just hit the wall as well. He lost the car going into Puhon. We went just round on him. Consistency will definitely decide this race over on Radoslav Pironkiewicz with the big hit into the tire wall as well. What is happening here? You can see the debris lying around from that Iron Names Porsche.
Yeah, if you happen to be at Spa-Francorchamps today and you're selling Porsche spares, you could be making a killing.
You'll probably not have to work any other day in the rest of your life.
Cesco Monreiro opted not to repair his car and carrying on, so he must be fairly happy with how it's going, despite its slightly war-torn appearance.
Now we're only 1/10 into the race, basically.
It's very true.
And we haven't really had that many traffic situations either, because the GT3 field kind of disintegrated quite quickly in the sense of, like, you only have singular cars. Doc Polassa will now have 2 Vantages in front of him, but that's pretty much the most you will get at a time. Just makes it a lot easier for the hypercars. If you think back to Road Atlanta, for instance, to the 200-mile event, I think it was.
Yeah.
Had a lot more to do back then.
That's very true. Yeah, the GT3s spacing out a bit will definitely be helping the hypercar drivers.
But it will definitely decide in the end, if you can get through the traffic cleanly without any issues, whether you will keep your positions or not. Now for Julian Chico, for instance, it will be much more crucial to get past the Vantages and OG Stan cleanly, because Dennis Kurzer is only 2 seconds behind. Oh, and he gets held up quite a bit there, because the Ventures are also fighting with each other, of course. They are fighting for position. For 12, that is.
Yeah, they are next to each other on track, and there's a lot of weaving around going on.
Where do you find the hole to go through? You don't really want to just launch it on the inside, because the GT3s do have priority. So if you're not familiar with how endurance works, Oh, and contact between the two cars, sending Dennis Kurzer off. And this costs him a huge amount of time because the BMW you see behind him, that's Enrico Boininger. That will also be 4th position. But if you don't know how... Oh, and has there been contact again? Because
I couldn't see contact, but I wonder if it's a netcode contact. It certainly looked like a car contact, but the cars weren't next to each other.
Well, Danny Edmonds luckily escaped this one seemingly without too much damage. But yeah, Dennis Kurzer, in the brink of a moment, basically lost 6 seconds to Julian Chicot, and now has Enrico Boininger behind him. That's how fast things can go. But what you do as a GT3 in those races, you stick to your line, you be predictable, and the faster car finds a way around you. Enrico Boininger now making the move for 4th. Can he keep it in the braking zone? Yes, he can.
It was a good safe move there. He got past well before the end of the Kemmel straight.
Let's take another look at the GT3 field. That is led by Kimi Hapler still. A Porsche behind that should be Radoslav Pironkovic, who went to the pits to repair his car after the incident he had at No Name. Audi Stan currently in 2nd, and Mark Koenig still in 3rd, although he lost a bit more time to the cars ahead. But Enrico Boininger seems to be a lot more, I don't know how really you want to say it, but in harmony with the car. More confidence,
Yeah,
more stability.
he seems to be driving very smoothly. I know we've mentioned before about how the BMW seems to be the slightly easier car of the two to drive, with the 963 probably having more raw pace, but it's a bit riskier. But yeah, Enrico Boininger seems to be fairly comfortable right now, which is always a good thing for a 2-hour race.
It's also nice that we see both cars in the Hypercar class being represented today. What I find cool as a coincidence, of course, having the 4 car in 4th position. Even more with the BMW Hypercar having the number board, or the position board, on the quarter panel. I think is a neat little thing. Aganimachi running a bit wide here. Can do that a couple of times, but do it too often and you will receive a penalty. And he already had one drive-through today. Sure, he doesn't want another one. But
no, for sure.
He's close.
It is a long race, but there's only so much you can do.
Indeed. And of course, as the driver with the highest safety rating, I'm sure he will want to retain that. Very easy to spot this 963.
Yeah, he's gone for one of the different liveries for the 963 that he picked up on the Battle Pass.
Oh, nice catch there on the brake from Mark, but that cost him time and may have just flat spotted the rear tires. But one of the, let's say, little advantages of having no ABS, you can just lock the car down. It's something that you usually hear in NASCAR a lot, lock her down, meaning you just completely press the brakes and the car will kind of tilt itself into the right direction again. Because when the cars are not spinning, the car can basically not do any more momentum change. That's what he just did there, but it comes at the cost of tire life.
And probably his wrists.
And probably his wrists, yeah. Class leader being overtaken by class leader. Because that was Ronan Hood, who's still leading the Hypercar category. 14 seconds in front of Polassa.
Good view there of the ridiculous closing speed you have between a Hypercar and a GT3, depending on which part of the track you're on.
Top speed difference can get up to 30 to 35 kph at certain parts. If you had a bit longer straight like Daytona, even 40. It really is very fast. But I think what's really cool about the Hypercars is that you also have to brake quite a bit earlier, so you can't just dive it down the inside of any GT3. And on the other side, you don't lose too much time being behind a GT3 in the corners, because the cornering speeds through lower speed turns are quite similar, actually.
Yeah, once you get on the slower corners, obviously, the massive amount of error you get from a Hypercar doesn't affect you so much, so then you're just down to 4 patches of rubber like every other car, and also the slight disadvantage of not having ABS. Plus, these cars are pretty long compared to a GT3 car, so they're not quite as nimble.
Therefore even more stable, so always advantages and disadvantages, I guess. But
yeah, true.
Yeah, I mean, the Hypercars really, I think, have been one of the best, you could even say, revolutions in motorsports, because it completely revived endurance racing. If you think about the LMP times before, they were great, no doubt about it, but there wasn't really that much competition. And now we have basically, and a bit of contact there between Mark Koenig and Radoslav Piwonkiewicz, who left him plenty of space. Just watch out for the Hypercars. Kimi Hapler now being passed by Gob Polassa. But
keeping well out of the way.
Yeah, we have almost 2 digits of we have, I think. Don't we have 10 or 11? Plus even more coming in the next few years, entering Hypercar class across IMSA and WEC.
Yeah, it's definitely been good to see all the manufacturers jumping on the class and taking part. I hope in the future we can see it a little bit more represented in RENNSPORT. At the minute we just have the two, the BMW and the Porsche 963. But if you are watching and you're thinking, hey, I fancy driving a Hypercar, don't do it. It's really hard.
Or do it, because you can do it for free this week with the 963. Try out all the gimmicks they come with. And Nico Bonninger picked up some damage on the front left. But yeah, they are quite hard to drive. It probably isn't something you would consider a beginner car. But when you get the hang of them, you can have a lot of fun with them. And in general, they have a lot of features that a GT3, of course, doesn't have with the hybrid system on these two cars, and all the kind of settings you can do to basically push the car just that bit further. Mark is also closing in on Dennis Kurzer, who's back up into 4th. But of course, if you like what you see, then you can always join these events as well. They are normal public events, So you can join if you have a sufficient safety rating for this event. And they are just listed in your official contest tab. They start at 8 p.m. CEST. So if you fancy joining those, next week we will go back to the RENNSPORT community leagues, which are GT3s, 45-minute races, quite simple. And yeah, you can just join there. RCL, of course, also connected to a bit of a championship, so if you want to fight for some glory, that is your place to go. And the next RCE will be in 2 weeks, where we will still have to announce what it will actually be, but keep your eyes open for it. Might be very interesting. Gap between class leader Kimi Harplan, GT3 and OG Stan in second up to 14 seconds at this point. And Mark Koenig dropped down to 13 and actually has DNF from this race. So it really becomes a race of survival here. Meanwhile, for the hypercars, Marco Nemachi less than 3 seconds now to Dennis Kurzer. So about a second per lap pace advantage on that Porsche in the orange Desert livery compared to the Porsche without the orange Desert livery. Also, Julian Gokpulasa has picked up damage on the front left, and Julian Chico is less than a second behind him again. I've not noticed what happened to Gokpulasa in all honesty. But they are quite close to each other again. And Julian Chico with a great exit of Las Azuras takes second place. But now Gokpulasa will be in slipstream down the Camel Straight. And the Hypercar, you do get quite a bit of slipstreaming.
Yeah, he's in a very good slipstreaming position there. Already pulling out, giving plenty of room to Julian Chico. Not quite able to get alongside, though. Maybe pulled out a little bit early.
And that is Julian Chico up into second. Now will Gokpulasa be able to find his pace? That will be the big question mark. But of course, it's still 1.5 hours left to run, and doing that without mistakes is a different challenge. For Brandon Hood out front, it seems quite easy at the moment. There's a 22-second lead over Julian Chico. Of course, anything but guaranteed in this race, but it is a nice cushion to have.
Mark Onomachi's moving, well, fortuitously, you've just popped him on camera. Mark Onomachi's making some moves slowly up the field, but he is driving quicker laps than Dennis Kurtzer and Gokpulasa right now. He's fairly close to Dennis Kurtzer, but then there's a big gap to Gokpul. So might be a while before he closes that gap.
To my knowledge, Dennis Kurtzer didn't have the drive-through like Marc Onyemachi and I think also Enrico Bräuninger had. So that would indicate that those two are strong on pace.
Yeah. Little fun fact for you, though. The quickest driver on circuit right now is Julian Secor, who has the best lap of the race at a 2:01.9. It's only a tenth quicker than Rowan de Hood, and obviously there is 22 seconds between them, but he is faster on track.
He's also been 4/10 faster last lap. And one big difference in this race, of course, is that you have the time to make up ground. Now Marc Onyemachi going for the move on the inside, now is backing out of it. But with the hypercars, forcing another driver into a mistake, of course, becomes a big topic.
Yeah, if you can force the driver ahead of you to be a bit hasty on the brakes and lock up a little bit, then it can mess with their entire kind of game plan.
But it is very clear that Marc has the pace advantage in this fight. But having the pace advantage is one thing, getting past the other.
Yeah, for sure. And they do have 90 minutes left, so he doesn't want to be hasty about it. He wants to make sure that he gets through it nice and clean. Dennis Kurtzer wants to stay nice and clean as well, so they're being very respectful, which is always good to see.
But he's not afraid to show himself. He's constantly just keeping it on the inside line, which is slower, but you do it, like, intimidate the other driver quite a bit with that. She can show, hey, I can match your pace while being completely off my line. Some might not care at all, but others might be a bit nervous. Of course, these two also know each other. They've been racing each other quite a few times. As they go up a whoosh, nose to tail.
Not just pulling along on the Kemmel straight. Looks like he's managed to get the move done.
Chose a very classical move to do for P4. But if it works, it works.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get past safe and you don't mind losing a little bit of time and waiting, then it's always best to wait for the Kemmel straight. There's not a lot the other person can do about it. Especially if you can get a faster run through Eau Rouge.
Vladislav Pironkovic found his way into 4th in class. General GT3 has seen a lot of shuffling around, but for him that's a pretty good going, I think. Even though the gap to Cesco Munera for the podium position is quite far. But Julian Chicot is slowly closing in on Rowan and her 21.6 seconds now. Another 9/10 gained last lap.
I think Rowan had a little bit of traffic. So that maybe lost him a little bit of time there, but he's got enough of a buffer. I don't think he'd be too worried just yet.
I'm really curious to see whether one of these drivers elects to make a, let's say, scheduled or normal pit stop. I think a lot of them will just evaluate during the race, but so far it doesn't seem like the tires suffer. maybe it will more come down to flat spots. Something like the situations Mark Onimachi encountered coming out of Stavelo. Or maybe also the situation between Gokpolas and Julian Chico. They will more or less decide whether one decides to go into the pit, I'd presume.
Yeah, fuel isn't an issue here today. It's pitting is all down to whether you've got tires, you need new tires, or you've got damage. So if these guys can look after their tires properly, you shouldn't need to pit. But of course, looking after your tires is easier said than done in a hypercar.
You know, Enrico Bruiniger has lost both his headlight, or at least most parts of it. So I don't know if it was wall or car contact, but he definitely hit something on both sides, which is remarkable to make it that, well, mirrored. But it seems to be going fine for him. Seems to also match the pace of Dennis Kurzel, maybe even go a tiny bit quicker from lap to lap.
Rowan's last lap without traffic was a 2:02.5. Julian Segura must have been hitting the traffic that Rowan had previously. He did a 2:04.2. So let's open the gap up a little bit more again. It's the concertina you get quite often in a longer endurance race as people have to deal with traffic.
Yeah, definitely it's a give and take all the time. And sometimes you get lucky, sometimes not. It's the same for the GT3 class, because also there you will lose time, or sometimes even gain time with the traffic from the hypercars. But one, I think, big thing in those races, you can't blame a singular overtaking or lapping maneuver, okay, unless there's contact maybe, but like for you losing or winning a race, because in the end everything equalizes. You may be lucky early in the race with some traffic while somebody else is not, but at the end of the race it may be the other way around.
Yeah, it is a big thing as we do endurance races, and I know from endurance races I've done in the past, you try not to worry about it too much and just deal with the traffic as it comes. Sometimes you get dealt a good hand, sometimes you don't. Just keep your eyes on ahead of the road and try to plan before you get there if you're in the faster class. And if you can meet people, like adjust your pace slightly and meet people at a place that's easy to overtake, then that's always preferred. Even if you lose a little bit of lap time, you'll gain more in the long run.
Meanwhile, Dennis Kurz has lost 5th position to Enrico Bruiniger somewhere in Sector 2 last lap. Again, no damage on the car, so I presume it was a little lock-up or spin.
Yeah, Dennis Kurtz's last lap was a 2:17. Perfectly fine if he was in a GT3, but in a hypercar, it does suggest he had a bit of an off-track moment. Mark Onimachi last lap, joining the 2:02 gang, doing a 2:02.4. So he's definitely decided to step up the pace. He's 15 seconds shy of Gogpo Lasser in third right now. Maybe getting a bit more comfortable, getting into the rhythm of things a little bit more.
Yeah, again, in GT3, not much that has changed. Kimi Hapla running away with it at the moment against OG Stan and Cesco Monera, as we hit the 33% mark of this race. I think for Kimi Hapler this is more of a chill drive. Not to say that he doesn't have competition, but we know that Kimi is very strong in those longer runs. Can take it easy.
Yeah, for sure. But there's always the challenge with an endurance race that you've got to do it for 2 hours. Not something these guys particularly practice a lot, driving for 2 hours straight. So it can throw some wild cards up as you, especially if you have got a fairly big lead, your concentration can wander a little bit.
Oh, Władysław Piłonkiewicz losing it on the curb, just like Dominik Ladler and Maximilian Dehn did yesterday. The car behind him, Cesco Monia, that's not for position, that's Cesco putting a lap on Piłonkiewicz. But yeah, not the ideal race for him either this time. And
no, for sure. Unfortunately, we've lost all of the cars that aren't 911s. So it's just the 911 Cup now with the GT3 field.
Well, at least for the overall standings, we still have 2 fighters in the BMW M hybrids. Gok Polasa in 3rd and Enrico Boiniga in 5th. It also seems like Julian Chicot, or whether Ronin Hood, increased the pace. Julian Chicot is pretty much on the same pace he was before, but Ronin Hood went back into the 2021s. Which is only 0.2 slower than the fastest lap time of the race, set per Julian Chicot, still the 21.9, or the 201.9 rather said. But Ron's best lap time is the 202.13.
Yeah. Yeah, with the GT3 field thinning a little bit, then Rowan's got a lot of clean air ahead of him. He should be able to just sit back and get some nice fast laps in, while the people behind deal with the last little bits of traffic and they get their own stint in the clean air.
Finishing in this race is definitely going to be a big accomplishment, especially in the hypercars.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that will be what many people are chasing for. Interestingly enough, we only lost 1 hypercar so far, which was the very brutally struck car from Božidar Zelaskov.
Yeah, I think he had a bit of another unfortunate spinning accident and decided that was enough. He'd only just got out of the first sector, so it would have been a long, long way to limp back when he was already, I think, 2 laps down after his repair. So sorry to see him go. He seemed very dedicated to trying to finish the race, but every man has his limits.
What's definitely interesting about this race compared to some other ones, multi-class ones we had, we didn't really see any issues with car-to-car contact. We had the situation with Gokpo and Julian earlier in the race, but that was of course between 2 hypercars, and then I believe it was Dennis Kurzer and the 2 Aston Martins running into each other. But those were not really big things in the grand scheme of things, so it has been clean for in that, but I'm surprised at how many GT3s struggle today. I mean, Spa is usually a very easy track for GT3s.
Yeah, it's a track that definitely every sim racer knows like the back of their hand. It's in pretty much every game you can think of, and people have usually done an awful lot of laps of it. But yeah, it seemed to be a lot of unforced errors coming out today. Maybe getting a little bit caught out by something, bit of nerves maybe at the beginning of a 2-hour race.
For OG Stan, it's definitely good showing so far. I mean, not only would it be a second place, but in general, he's been somebody who's usually been more of a midfielder, I'd say. With very good
Yeah,
races to show for, definitely, but not many people could say after this, hey, I did a 2-hour race on RENNSPORT and came second in class.
that's very true.
But it's still a long way to go.
Yeah, his best lap time so far has been a 2:17, which is a little bit slower than what Kimi is running right now, which you'd expect because Kimi is very quick. But yeah, he's a little bit ahead of Chestumanera as far as pace is concerned. There's obviously quite a large gap between them, so he's got a fair buffer zone that he doesn't have to worry too much about if he has a bad lap. So he can concentrate on trying to keep his tires nice and fresh and making it to the end of this race. Chestu actually running for him. He's only a second off his best lap pace, which is pretty good going.
Especially considering the damage he picked up.
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like,
I
for
don't know.
me, Cesco is a bit of in the phase we had Adi Zahin for quite some time, where he just couldn't catch a break from instances that weren't really his fault or that were just plain unlucky.
Yeah, he has been very unlucky the last few races, which you always kind of feel for someone when they're having a bit of bad luck because it does seem to hit you pretty hard. And especially in our races, having the damage model turned on, it can seem to kind of unfairly punish you when things like that happen.
One Hood making his best Tim Schroeder impression. Oh, and going around the outside, that was... I wouldn't know if I would want to take that risk at this stage in the race, but Dennis Kurzer in the pits, he's getting some fresh rubber. So for him, the flat spot just a bit too much.
Yeah, he's not. He's doing a little bit repairing as well. Didn't think his car looked that damaged, to be honest, but he's getting a bit of a repair job. Mark Onomachi was the fastest guy on track last lap, doing a 2:02.9. Rowan briefly popping his way into the 2:03s. Mark has managed to close the gap to Gogpo down to 12 seconds. It was then another 12 seconds behind Julian Sicko.
Pit lane exit very tight for those hypercars, but just doable. And Dennis Kurzer is back out on track.
I don't know about you, Lino, but I would quite like to see the full endurance pit lane at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the pit exit after a whoosh, I think it would make a few situations. We don't really see that here today. That doesn't really affect this race. I think Cesco, no, Swerslav Pioncourage still in the pits. It would make some pit exits a bit less dangerous, let's say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I said not a big issue today, but it might be in the future, who knows. But of course, taking a pit stop with the endurance pit is very different, let's say. Of course, it takes a lot more time. But yeah, would be a
Woe
nice element.
betide you get a drive through because that is painful.
Yeah, then it indeed becomes very painful. drive-through on Spa is more normal, could say.
Yeah.
Slow on Critch back out on track. But it's not like Daytona where it's like really painful. But yeah, it's not fun either.
Seeing as I'm foiling you with conjecture, what's your thoughts on the endurance start line, which is after the hairpin?
Well, you could argue it makes stuff a lot more interesting. You could argue it makes them a lot more dangerous. I think most series like the WC also use the normal starting line, not the endurance one.
Yeah, I think
Mainly
they do,
the
yeah.
GTWC, so the 24 hours of Spa using the start-finish line facing Rouge. I mean, it looks spectacular, doesn't it? Having 40, 45
does, yeah.
cars leading up to Rouge side by side, but yeah.
Yeah, you have the added safety of not having a hairpin right after the start of the race, but then you also have the added danger of a lot of side-by-side through Eau Rouge.
Well, mostly at least you don't get 3 wides because you can't accelerate fast enough for that, but yeah, I'm not sure if I would prefer it if I was a driver.
And you also get a lot of side-by-side all the way down the Kemmel Straight into the corners and people trying to outbrake you.
Definitely looking forward to the event this year. I mean, I think in June it is, right? Will be a very interesting month. We have the 3 big endurance races, or 3 of the very big endurance races within a month, which I think we didn't ever have before. Can just double check that in a moment, but yeah, it will be interesting. Of course, we will also provide some events here on RENNSPORT to go with them.
I think it's not available in the UK, but I believe BMW made like a documentary about it, doing it last year. That is available on some streaming services, but I don't seem to be able to find it in the UK.
There are lots of good documentaries as well about most teams have something, especially, for example, Porsche. But
Yes.
yeah, we are kind of in a historic age at the moment, I'd say. We are getting close to 100 years of racing at the Nordschleife. We just had the 100-year jubilee at Le Mans. Spa is having an anniversary, I think, soon-ish, or had it recently.
That rings a bell, but I can't remember which one, I've got to admit. But yeah, there's been a lot of historic racing going on in the big 3 of 24-hour. Well, I always consider the big 3 of 24-hour racing anyway. I'm sure some other circuits would disagree.
Daytona.
Bathurst.
I mean, that's not 24 hours, is it?
No.
It's a big race, but it's not 24 hours. But yeah, to give you a quick calendar rundown, on June 14th, Le Mans 24 hours, on June 21st, Nürburgring 24 hours, and on June 28th, Spa 24 hours. So,
going to be a lot of engine rebuilding going on.
very much so indeed. Marc Onimachi having to wait for his chance to get past Cesco Montoya. Here the car behind that is Dennis Kurzer. He's a lap down, so this is not directly for position between Marc Onimachi and Dennis Kurzer. But I'm sure he will try to get that lap back.
Marc Onimachi currently lapping about 6/10 faster than Gokpo Lassa, so he is quicker still. But the gap on between their paces has reduced quite a bit. So he's creeping closer. We're about halfway through the race right now. So if people are thinking of changing tyres, you would think the halfway point would make sense.
But if somebody decides to take tires, even if it's Ron, he would probably fall back to Gok Polasa. And it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like there would be... I mean, there seems to be quite a big tire advantage, but... You could count with changing tires and then potentially also repairing some damage. Let's say 45 seconds, 50 seconds. Entry to exit pit stop. So yeah, you really have to decide, do you do it now or not at all? But with the lap times, I mean, all of them are lapping in the 204s right now, except for Enrico Buoniga, Dennis Kurz, and Buoniga just slightly slower. It becomes a very interesting question.
Yeah, and possibly one of the detrimental things about these hypercars is you do have to concentrate a lot when you're driving. I think it's perhaps a bit easier on a GT3 where you've got the driving aids to help you out. You don't have to be like 100% focused all the time like you do with a hypercar. I'm trying to do the kind of mental maths of, am I going to change tires? Have I got enough tires left? Does everything feel okay? How much time is left? Where will I come out if I change tires? That's all kind of brain bandwidth that takes you away from racing.
Yeah, and you just need one GT3 in your way to basically lose you a lot of time if you are not aware of it. Just a few quick math or a few quick calculations. With most cars doing 204s currently, and we have seen them doing 202s low, so you could say about 2.5 seconds lost per lap now with these tires.
Yeah.
We have in 1 hour of racing, since it's a 2-minute lap time, round about 30-ish laps to do. Let's say 25 to 30. You would gain 50 seconds, so you would basically buff out your pit stop. Of course, those tires will drop off as well, but so do the other guys. It's just the question, will those tires have a cliff or not?
Yeah. Which, like I said before, I don't think many people have driven for 2 hours on these tires, so it's kind of reaching a bit into the unknown here. Gokpo Lassa had a bit of a shocking last lap, did a 209.9. I don't know if it was traffic involved or a bit of an unforced error through the corners, but that has put Marco Amachi to 6 seconds behind him.
Yeah, for him, it will probably be a big question. If he comes in and changes tires, he will temporarily lose time on Ron and Hood, bringing out the yellow flag in turn 1. So, the first real mistake we've seen from him all day.
Yeah, he had a bit of a spin coming into the hairpin there. Whether he decides that's screwed his tires up enough for him to want to change them or not, I don't know. But his last lap was a 203.3, so he seemed to have fairly good pace on them.
But can he keep the consistency? That will be quite... What we are talking about right now only really affects Hypercar, and he goes wide again. I think he's not expecting the understeer he has now. And it's bringing Julian
No,
Chicot in.
his steering is fairly extreme, shall we say, when it comes into corners.
But yeah, of course, all of this, not a big deal for the GT3s. We know that these tires can do 2 hours in the green hell, so they will most likely be able to do 2 hours in Spa as well. Then it's also a fact of your timing of the pit stop. And Enrico Bornea is actually in the pit changing tires, so he's going for it. And I think the other guys, when they notice the pace of that BMW, will decide whether they come in as well. But we still have 5 cars on the lead lap in Hypercar. Might change to 4 for a moment, because Enrico Borninger should come out just behind Rowan and Hurt. Coming onto the circuit now. Where's Rowan and Hurt? Just in front of him. Of course, these two, as you might see from their name tags. Oh, and Julian Chicot is also into the pits. Polassa up into second with that. So a couple of Hypercar drivers actually coming in. Mark is also staying out. What about... Dennis Kutzer already was in the pit, so he is on fresh tires already. But with the 2 cars we see here, Breuninger and Ron and Hood, they are from the same team. They're both driving for FDRT. It seems like Ron and Hood is having a bit more pace than Enrico Breuninger, even with fresh tires.
Yeah, I think Enrico was trying to get past for a second. Ronan had a couple of bad corners, so he thought he might have had more pace, but I think Rowan's settled his nerves a bit more and is getting back into more of his original rhythm.
But if Ron and Hood decides to stay out, and Julian Chicot with the fresh tires can gain a lot on him, I don't think those tires will stay as they are. I think they might get a bit worse over the next few laps still. And Ronan is staying out, so he's maybe committing to it. But if he comes in later than Julian Chicot, he will have the tire advantage in the end, of course, but it could be a massive undercut.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see Rowan's lap times over the next 20 minutes or so and just kind of try and get an idea of how much pace he's losing because of his tires. Going through the bus stop chicane there, he was steering a lot each way, so that's only going to start generating more and more heat, which leads to more and more wear.
Not even to mention any possibility of flat spots. Marco Nimachi has closed the gap to 3 seconds as well behind Gok Polassa. There we can see him in the background. But yeah, of course, for Enrico Borninger, this is also not quite ideal, because he is in a bit of dirty air. The cars don't have a long dirty air trail, something that you might know from the likes of Formula 1, where they have, when you go into turn and follow another car, you lose downforce, therefore ruining your tires quite a bit. And they have a very long trail. They made it better with the 2022. Oh, Enrico Borninger losing the car over the curbing and heavy hit into the tire barriers. And that unmade a lot of good progress. He did lost the diffuser as well.
Oh, and the accidental overspin.
Yeah, the diffuser, very big part of the aerodynamics as well, so worse than dirty air. But there seems to be more damage as well. Marco Nimachi, 2 seconds to Gok Polassa. Both in very different situations.
Marco Nimachi's last lap was a 2:02.7, which is only 0.4 slower than his fastest lap, so he's definitely loving his tires right now.
Oh, and Gok Polassa is coming in. But there's Enrico Bräuniger is blocking the pit entry. And Gok Polassa is trying to help him, because he of course also wants to get into the pits. But it's something we have seen. Enrico Bräuniger just retired the car, but that not only cost Gok Polassa a lot of time, but we have not seen something like this.
It were a bit reminiscent of last year's Spa 24-hour.
Yeah, definitely.
Where one of the Ferraris got stuck behind another car on pit entry.
It's, I mean, it looks funny, but for Gok Polassa, this is a nightmare.
Yeah, that was been very infuriating.
He had such a good performance so far. He's gone down to 4th. RENNSPORTs, of course, a long way around. But yeah, he could have had a fight with Marco Onimachi going forward. But Marco Onimachi with that up into 2nd. 27 seconds clear of Julian Chicot, who with the new tires is lapping 3.291, while Marco Onimachi on the old tires is lapping 3.358.
Yeah, and Rowan de Hood's last lap was a 302.3, so he's seems to have regained a bit of his old pace again there.
Oh, and Ronan Hood is in the pits. Now the big question is, where will he emerge? If it is behind Marco Onimachi, this might be very interesting. Because he has a 50-second pit stop, he will come out behind Marco Onimachi.
Yeah, he's not... he's got refueling on his pit stop as well as changing tyres and repairs, so it's going to be a long pit stop for Rowan de Hood.
So if that Marco Onimachi goes into the lead...
he's going to be on... Depending on the gap he has, though, that means that Rowan's going to be on fresh tyres and Mark isn't.
But he will fall behind Julian Chicot as well.
Yeah. I think he is gonna. Rowan's still having a few seconds on the jacks before he gets let down.
He's coming out of the pits, but you can already see plus 12 seconds, 13, 14. He will be a long way down. He will come out in front of Gok Polassa. But yeah, what could have been if it wasn't for Enrico Bräuniger blocking the pit entry. I would be curious to see how it actually happened, to be honest. But yeah, Gokpo could have emerged in front of Ronan Hood as well. I think that's fair to say. But with that, all running hypercars on fresh tires. We've still got 50 minutes left to go. It's a long distance still to cover. But yeah, the pit cycle basically shifting around a lot of things. Do you think Ronan Hood saw the pace of Julian Chicot and then decided to come in?
Yeah, he maybe did, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of around the time you'd expect a pit stop, and of course, he had those little spins. So that maybe forced his hand a little bit as far as deciding to change tyres is concerned.
So just to give you a little rundown on what the situation now is for the Hypercar class. Marco Onimachi leading this race on old tires, 69-minute old tires. And he still goes at least a mid 2:03 time. But then we got Julian Chicot, Ronan Hood, and Gok Polassa on fresh tires. Gok Polassa, who lost a lot of time due to the pit entry. But Julian Chicot and Ronan Hood, they both did, or were at least close to a sub 2 times. So for them, they are hunting down Marco Onimachi at a rate of potentially 1.5 to 2 seconds a lap. With 50 minutes left to go, you're looking at 25 laps. So theoretically 50 seconds, which means for Julian Chicot, very possible. For Rohan Hood, just out of scope maybe. Depending on how this race continues to develop. Yeah, very unfortunate, of course, for Enrico Buoni, who worked himself in a very good position. Also means that the leading GT3 is now in P6 overall in the hands of Kimi Hapler. And OG Stan is also still on the lead lap. I just want to mention that real quick. Only 50 seconds down from Kimi Hapler after 17 minutes of driving. That's not too bad. Kimi Hapler is one of the fastest drivers we have. And pretty much a benchmark to be at the top of any race. So pretty good going for OG Stan here.
Yeah, it's a good result for him, and he should definitely be pleased with himself with how he's driving right now. He's keeping it consistent and he's keeping it safe, and he's looking good for a good result.
I mean, so for Francesco Monero as well, even though he was very unlucky this race, he basically just about went a lap down on Kimi Hapler. But other than that, he's also not too far off for the mishaps he had. There we can see the pink Iron Dennis Porsche in front of him. That is Kimi Hapler.
Rowan Hood's last lap with the pit stop was a 3:21. Now, that doesn't include all of the pit lane from where he made his stop. So he does lose a little bit more time than that. But from that, you can kind of see that it was at least 40 seconds in the pits.
Yeah,
No,
indeed.
more than that. A minute 20. So, yeah, he had a big old pit stop and he's got a lot of work to do. But he's only 17 seconds behind Julian Chicot right now, just on a 2:02.4 on his first flying lap. So he's not wasting any time getting back up to speed.
I mean, he also has no time to lose anymore, basically.
That is true. He knows exactly where he is for the rest of the race.
For him, this essentially means hot stinting the rest of the race. Oh, and Gokpolassa is off. And Stavolo, just a little spin. Gets it rolled around nicely, though. Can rejoin without any further issues.
All of our top three hypercar drivers here have got a fair bit of clean air before they catch up to another GT3, so their lap time should be fairly representative of their pace when they come round.
Yeah, Julian Chicot will have to clear Kimi Hapler. It will be soon-ish, but yeah, it should be around the run up to Blanchimont.
We're under hood setting a purple second sector. Coming across the line doing a 202 dead. That'd be nice for you. You like those nice
really
even
liked
numbers?
it. Yes.
But still 1/10 behind the fastest lap of Julian Sicko. Marco Amachi's last lap was pretty much a 2:04, so he's about a second and a half slower than Julian Sicko was in the last lap, with 26 seconds between them and 45 minutes left of the race to go. I'll let you do your own head math.
I mean, I also need to get paid for something. One in Hood will have Dennis Kurzer in front of him fairly soon. That, of course, will be a blue flag situation. But it seems like the new tires really are what Rondon Hood needed. Currently on lap 37 for the leading hypercars. The GT3s are a bit further behind, as you might imagine, but they are currently on lap 34, so only 3 laps difference actually between the car classes. As one and Hood is about to put a lap on Dennis Kurzer, gets a nice slipstream down the run or up the run to Blanchimont. So a little toe there from 963 to 963. But yeah, time is running thinner and thinner. It doesn't seem to me that Julian Sicko is making the big progress at the moment. He's gained quite a lot of time last lap to Marco Nimachi because he had a bit of a traffic situation overall, or lost time otherwards, because his last lap time was at 2:05. But yeah, for Julian Sicko, plus 23 seconds. Will the tire gamble pick up later in the stint, or does it not? That will be the big question. Well, also, we don't know. The tires from Sicko and Ronenhood will also drop off again later on.
Yeah, for sure. And then if they start pushing, then it could nullify the entire gamble, essentially. If they only need a little bit of a lockup or something, and it's going to start messing with the rhythm. So they really need to concentrate for the next, well, at least good 20 minutes or so, and try and make the most of these fresh tires.
I mean, on the other hand, Marc Oniwashi has done a great job preserving his tires. Of course, he had a little Staulo moment, but apart from that, I think we really haven't seen his true pace potential, if I'm honest. Because he's just been taking it easy.
His best lap was still a 202.3, which is by no means a slouch lap. But he's not been pushing too close to that. He's been driving kind of within his means, and I think that's been paying off as far as tyres are concerned. You can see that he had a strategy in mind, and he's sticking to it.
Of course, that's also one of the cool things, at least in my opinion, about the Hypercar. It's not a car that you push flat out for 2 hours like the GT3. For example, Kimi Hapler. He's doing 2:16.3, the best lap of the race from him, 2:15.8. So still within half a second without doing a pit stop. But
yeah, which I think they quite often say about how endurance races in GT3 cars are now just becoming 24-hour sprint races. It's just like constantly pushing the car as hard as it can go, which is very exciting to watch. Whereas the hypercars, it's a bit more about pace management and with that tires.
yeah, and it's a very different skill to just being fast driver. Not to take away from that, but we know Mark's pace. We know he's quick. But if you were to put him in GT3s against the likes of Kimi Hapler, they would probably run away with it earlier or later, or at least over the duration of the race. But Mark is one of the most consistent and most calm drivers out there, and he really shows that with the Hypercar, because this is really much a big factor. And if you take a look at who's second and who's third, Julian Chico and Ronan Hood, they are pretty much the opposite. They are rapid, but not really known for their consistency or calmness in terms of driving style.
Yeah, for sure. And you can see that. Well, I can see it with you can't see his lap times, but with Mark's lap times are very, very tightly bunched together. Even though he's on his own in the middle of nowhere, his lap times are very, very consistent. He's obviously got a pattern he's happy with, and he's driving it, and it's led to him leading the race currently by 22 seconds. So it's been his strategy that has put him in that position as much as his ability to lap consistently.
And so far, the tire gamble really doesn't seem too fruitful. Of course, they make up time and they're probably in a safer position, but yeah, it also is a big what if with Ronan Hood if he didn't repair damage, depending on if the damage repair was necessary or not. Because that
Yeah,
lost him
for
a lot
sure.
of time, and didn't seem like his car was too badly damaged. He had a few instances, but
Yeah, he seemed to have a good pace before then. So yeah, his car didn't seem massively damaged. I think his repairs were about 25 seconds. So whether that was worth repairing or not was fairly debatable.
you will surely find out after the race in the Discord. So if you don't want to miss the action after the race, make sure to join the Discord. And Tim Schroeder, who unfortunately isn't here to race today, but he's in a voice chat with this man, Kimi Hapler, reported there has been a little incident between him and Dennis Kurzer, so this might be one of the first incidents we had between them. Dennis Kurzer also in the pits. Not sure if it was for drive-through or repair work. But judging by the fact I can't see any damage on the car, I would presume it's repair work. But he's again coming out in front of Ruan Den Hood. He will have a bit of a deja vu moment with that.
Yeah. Hopefully not another small incident, as that would be painful.
Very interesting throttle inputs there from Ronin Hood. Basically doing like Senna back in the days, with always giving like a lot of very small throttle inputs. Of course, back then it was to spool up the turbos during the turn, but not really a thing on these cars. Seems to work for him,
No, that's
but
very true.
very interesting in a hypercar.
One thing we haven't touched on in the last 90 minutes of racing is the regeneration and delivery of the electrical power, because these are hybrid cars, obviously. It's something we can't tell from our spectating view, how much energy people have got and what delivery modes they're in when they're recharging and when they aren't. But that also plays a part into their pace. Quite a big part, really.
Yeah, of course, these cars are set up with like the normal mode, which tries to balance out your recovery and deployment. But you can set it into any mode you want, theoretically. So, if you want to have a banter lap, just put it into quali mode or into deployment high. But if you want to just play it a bit more conservative, you can also lower the the output of the electric engines. Or motors, I'm sorry. You know, some people really gripe about those different namings.
That's very true.
Apparently Kimi Hub has spun in I forgot the name, campus. Doesn't seem to be any damage on the car though, but is he getting a bit hasty? Who knows?
He's been out in front by himself for a long, long time. So it's no doubt his concentration starts to wander a little bit.
But he's coming into the pits. He has 90 seconds to OD stand, so he should easily emerge in front of him there, but interesting. Half an hour left to go in this race.
It does seem a bit unnecessary, but maybe he's decided why not.
Is he maybe trying to hot stint for the rest of the race?
He's doing the full works as far as pit stop's concerned. He should still well come out in front of OG Stan.
Yeah, OG Stan is just entering Puhon. If you can make it from Puhon to the start-finish line in 30 seconds, my dearest respect, but... You will probably see a bit of a hot lap stint then from Kimi after this. I think Marco Nimachi also increased the gap to Julian Chico by a second in the last lap because he's back up to 22 seconds. So Julian Chico can't really close in. Ronin Hood 14 seconds behind Julian Chico can close in a bit at least, but doesn't really help the two of them with the last half an hour now starting very soon.
Julian Chico's last lap was a 2:07, so I don't know whether he had bad traffic or a bit of an off-track moment, but he definitely not representative of the rest of his lap times. Kimi Hopla coming out of the pits 20 seconds ahead of OG Stan.
That is Scott Polassa behind OG Stan, the lone BMW driving. After he lost Enrico Running in a very weird incident.
It was a very strange incident.
But with 30 minutes left to go, let's take a look at what comes next week. Because next week we'll be back with the RCL. And yeah, it will be the start of the next season. Start off at Jeddah.
Yay!
Yay, more podcasts. But yeah, we will start off at Jeddah. It's a track that hosted a season opening race before. And it will do it again. So I'm very much looking forward to that. You can already check out the details in the app if you go to leaks and then upcoming. You will find the RENNSPORT Community League Season 6. And also that Jeddah will be a night race, of course. But yeah, that's your full calendar. I think we talked about it a bit last time, but not too much. Then going to Monza, Daytona, Fuji, Spa, and our, by now, pretty much established community vote.
Will it be Road Atlanta for the 3rd time running?
You will find out in the summer of 2025. It all lies in your hand, guys. So, but of course, it will be plenty of time until we will go to the community vote, because that will be at the end of July. Plenty of racing action until then, involving a few 2.4-hour races that will come up. With the RNL finishing with a 2.4-hour race on the 21st of June.
I'm sure nobody's looking forward to 2.4 hours of Nordschleife in GT3s.
Nah, nobody ever. But yeah, 2.4 hours at the Nordschleife will certainly be interesting. But let's go back to the 2 hours here at Spa-Francorchamps. Little black screen, but there we go. And I will never promise anything, because I would probably not remember doing it anyways.
Oh, Julian Sacco, after his little pace hiccup, just setting a 202.8, deciding that now's the time to put the hammer down. He's got the gap down to 20 seconds again between him and Mark Onamachi.
He's got about 15 laps to close in. That is where 1.5 seconds pace advantage he needs each lap. That is a big task to do. One though seems to have dropped off a bit of pace. He's still 14 seconds behind Julian Chicot. But he was looking pretty much to be in a position to maybe challenge for second in this race.
Yeah, I wonder if that was why Julian upped his pace a little bit, just to try and dash his dreams early on and not make a fight of it later.
If we would recap this race, I think you can pretty much divide it into 3 segments. The opening 15 minutes, then minute 15 to about 65 where then the pit stops happened, and after the pit stops to right now. And you always had like different kind of drivers up front. It shuffled around a lot. I think the only constant that was throughout was Kimi Hapler leading GT3.
Yeah, that's true.
But apart from that, in the opening phase, it seemed like Polassa was a very strong contender against Ronda and Hood. Now they're running 3rd and 4th, with Mark Onimachi taking over for after the pit stops. After it looked like Julian Chicot might be the dark horse in this race,
Yeah.
in the middle portion of it. So basically what we've seen is Mark Onimachi who had a drive-through at the start and emerged, I think, 7th in class, leading this race on pure consistency and not being in the need of new tires.
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting kind of contrast of driving styles going on there between Mark Onamachi and the rest of the field, really, as they've all had different pit stops at different times for different reasons. But also, Julian Chico has definitely done a fantastic race. Set fastest lap of the race still. And he's slowly creeping up on Mark Onomachi, but it may be a little bit not enough of a pace advantage from the tyres to make him be able to catch up.
One thing I will be
But
very interested to hear about will be the perspective from Rondon Hood after the race, because he seemed so much into control at the start of the race. If he just panicked into the pit stop, or if he tried to go the safe route to finish, it would be a completely valid or valiant effort as well. Finishing 2 hours of Spa in the Hypercar is a task to complete in the first place.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think any one of these drivers who's done the entire distance in a hypercar is worth a bit of applause.
Well, not only hypercars.
Yeah, but more so the hypercars.
That is a fair point. Yeah, we talked about how this race will be very different. The thing with an endurance race like this, it's of course not as exciting to live watch or as flamboyant with on-track racing action for the whole duration of the race. I think that's kind of obvious. But if you go through the race afterwards and just follow the storylines of it, I think every endurance race writes their own books. It's not like a sprint race where you look at maybe an overtake and then the result of the race. And then if you have a sprint race championship, look at how it developed over the championship. But you really look at each endurance race individually and the storylines behind it, which really makes it kind of unique.
The hood, just having another spin on the hairpin there and dropping way back from Julian Chico, I think that's put an end to his dreams of maybe grabbing second.
Yeah, unless Julian Chico does a mistake, or one thing I would never expect Mark Onimachi making a mistake. I think that is 3rd place for him. I would have been really interested what Gok Polasa could have done in this race if it wasn't for that incident at the pit entry, which he had no fault in at all.
No.
But I mean, so it was for the 24 hours of Spa last year. None of the cars that were then stuck in the pit entry really having any fault for it. It just has been very unfortunate for them. Would have been interesting to hear the driver radius of that.
Interesting is one way to put it, I suppose.
Entertaining is the other.
I don't think that would have been safe to broadcast.
I don't know what you could mean.
I'm sure the Ferrari was saying, oh dear, there appears to be a Lamborghini in my way. I'll sit here patiently and wait for it to move.
Well, if you listen to some, let's say, more American racing series and their radios, they don't seem to have a problem with it.
That's very true, yeah. I know the FIA don't like the drivers bringing the sport into disrepute. I say it's their fault for broadcasting it.
Very much so, indeed. On board with Julian Chico. So we can see it's lap 48.
Got 20 minutes left to go, which is going to be about, 18 laps?
Not sure yeah, sorry, 18.
18?
I would say 10.
Yeah.
Has been a long evening.
It's Sunday night. My brain stopped working a long time ago.
Mine's never worked in the first place. "17 seconds between Marc-André and Julian Chicot, but it seems like that won't really be enough, even though Julian Chicot is about 1.2 seconds faster per lap nowadays. And don't worry about the timer in the top left corner. Jumped over to 100 minutes, that's why it says 00.
Yep, still needs an extra digit or two.
Well, I hope we wouldn't have to cast a race with 2 more digits on our own. I think that would be quite a bit to do.
Maybe not solo, no. In some distant future where we decide to do a 12-hour race, I think we might have to rope Remco back into the commentary box.
Oh, and Vandenhood losing it on the curb there. Spins it around quite nicely. And also waits for the Porsche of Audi Stan and the Hypercar of, I think that's Dennis Kurzer, to go through. But yeah, Vandenhood pretty much sealed into 3rd place here now.
Julian Chicot is not giving up, though. There might be less of a chance, but there's still a chance. So he's still pushing.
Yeah, of course, due to some traffic he had, the gap has grown a bit again.
Yeah, his last lap was 2:04.8, which a bit higher than he has been doing, that's for sure.
Marc Onimachi, though, last lap at 2:03.232.
Yeah.
He's been babysitting
Do you like
those
that
tires.
2-3-2 thing?
Yeah, I do like that as well. Any kind of pattern in numbers I like, to be honest. But he's been babysitting those tires, and he's still able to push on them if he needs to. I mean, he doesn't necessarily need to right now. Could take it very easy. He has some traffic soon with the 8 car of Cesco Monuera. But apart from that, I think he should be clear for the rest of the race. Not sure he would catch Gok Polassa in the BMW M Hybrid. Who's still running, still in 4th. And Enrico Boininger also popping into the Twitch chat. And yes, we could see you. Well, from the view of this man, Gok Polassa, who didn't really find an entryway into the pit stops.
No, there was a bit of a Gandalf situation there.
Also missing the rear right braking light Gok Polassa there, but we won't go into the night here today, so he's spared from that.
One thing I do like about the hypercars, strange point, is how much you can see the driver through the window. You can see the driver a lot, and their hands moving the wheel and things. Yeah, I've been an advocate that we should have customizable helmets, and I think they'd be really good in hypercars.
It's kind of weird when you think about it that you can really see it in the hypercars, while in the GT3s, of course, the driver is much more enclosed in the GT3s in many ways. If you take a look at Kimi Hapler here, you can see a bit of helmet because it's very wide and a dark interior, but Apart from that, he is very enclosed with the seat around the helmet and stuff, but in the hypercar, it's like a fishbowl a bit.
Yeah, I can imagine if you're claustrophobic, a hypercar would not be a nice place to spend a triple stint in.
I have heard, though, that being in a prototype kind of car, it makes it very easy to sleep. Like, of course, not while you're driving, but when you're stationary in the pits, or like not in the pit stop, but like before the race or something. Because of course you have your custom molded seat that encloses you perfectly, and the car is fairly soundproof for like normal conditions. So when you're sitting in there, you're basically in a lie down position, and you have the door closed with the helmet on and stuff. Makes it perfect to sleep.
I've heard F1 drivers say that about when they're in the car, but in the pits, watching the monitor screens and things. It's fairly easy to drop off and have a little snooze.
I mean, it's a good point that it's getting kind of warm in a race car like this, but if you do it before the race start, the car isn't really hot inside usually. Unless you are in a country that
Yeah,
is very hot, where everything is very hot. I think there's a very famous clip of Sebastian Buemi falling asleep in his Toyota GR030, which is funny to watch. I think it was Mike Conway, but I'm not too sure if it was him, who then knocked on the car and woke him up. For Marco Nimachi, though, this race is, I think, one thing he anticipated a long time. We know he's a big advocate for longer races, a big fan of endurance races. And he really likes those environments, and he showed that he is very good in those environments as well, both in hypercars and in GT3s.
it's maybe why he's been pushing for them so much. He just fancied some wins.
It's wind farming. I think we will need some internal meetings with that. But apart from that, you can't deny he's done a great job so far. And with 12 minutes left on the clock, 17-second lead to Julian Chico. Unless he does a very big mistake somewhere, very unlikely that he will be catched in the time. Gokpolas is also a fair way up ahead, so this shouldn't be any issue. And I mean, we still have 5 hypercars left in this race.
Yeah, the attrition rate on the hypercars has definitely been pretty low. Obviously, people are starting to get the hang of them a little bit more and able to keep lapping safely. Enrico Breininger would have still been in if he didn't have that slight pit lane mishap. But yeah, Mark has been quite vocal about endurance events. He does like an endurance event, like you said. It's one of the things that he does a lot of in other sim racing games. And I think you can kind of see his cool-headedness paying off from there, maybe.
was a very solid dive there from Dennis Kotza into Rouge. I'm not sure you want to do that this late into the race when you can't really get close there, but might have been a small shock moment to Kimi Hafler, or he anticipated it. But we've seen it going wrong this weekend already. Not in game, but in real life. "14 seconds, the gap between Julian Chico and Mark Onimachi, who lost a lot of time last lap, interestingly enough. But we've seen those fluctuations more often.
He had a little bit of an off-track moment. I'm trying to think what turn it was. I saw it on screen, but I can't remember the turn name. But yeah, he just had a bit of a trip into the gravel and then came back on track again. So yeah, he lost a few seconds, but I don't think he'll be too worried about that right now.
Yeah, of course,
It
if
seems
he
to be
keeps the cushion like it is now, I think there's no way for Julian Chico to close in. He is aware of the risks that he can take. I'm pretty sure of that, at least. But you can't really just cool off in a race like this. You can't really just turn your head off for a couple of hours and 1 and hood losing the car on the curb as well. We've seen that quite a lot on this weekend for some reason. But yeah, you always have to be aware of traffic coming. You have to be aware of people maybe losing the car somewhere. So yeah, you always have to be on alert, on high alert, no matter where you are. And especially now for Mark, he has 3 cars in front of him. It is OG Stan, the next one in line, and Radoslav Pironkiewicz, who's now being passed by Gok Polasa. But he has done that, he has kept it out of trouble.
Yeah, he's driven a really good endurance race here, and I think it'll give some people a bit of food for thought on maybe what tactics to take into the 2.4 hour of Nordschleife. Quite a few of the drivers here today will also be driving that, and I know that's in GT3 cars, not in the hypercars, but it still gives you something to think about. Maybe a different approach than you would have otherwise have taken.
Yeah, but of course the Nordschleife is also a very different environment, and I think a lot of things that you might learn from the Hypercar race with taking it easy on some aspects and not being too egregious with certain moves apply to the Nordschleife even more in the GT3 than on any other track. Because you don't really have the leeway, and we've seen it in the RENNSPORT Nordschleife League from time to time, how easily you can lose a race. I mean, we've seen it yesterday with Ali Zaya. Solid second place all race around, and in the last lap he's losing it in the GT4. Without much pressure from behind as well, so somebody like Mark Onimachi will have a strong hand in there as well. Now Julian Chico will have to make his way through the traffic. can get them both in one go, basically, which is very neat for him. But only 5 minutes left on the clock. So it could just be 2 more laps.
Mark's pace just starting to drop off a little bit more now. It's unsure whether it's just him chilling out towards the end of the race and making sure he doesn't make any mistakes, or whether his tyres are getting a bit iffy.
I think he just took it very easy with the traffic. Vojislav Pironkovic in campus left a lot of space and he didn't go for it. And that's just exactly what we've been talking about. But for him, I think he's not going to go any risks anytime soon. With still 10 seconds. And we will only have 2 more laps after this. And of course, if you want to try out what you could do in a long run, the Porsche 963 is currently free. And of course, Spa is also free, because except for the Nordschleife, all of our tracks are available for free. So if you want to try your pace against these guys, 2:01.9, the fastest lap of the race. The most guys pace around 2:02 with fresh tires. .6 seconds the gap at this stage.
Sorry, we don't do music.
Need some elevator music for the background.
Told you could jam on stream. It'd be fine.
Maybe we need the RENNSPORT
As long as you-
band for live entertainment.
As long as you don't play anything copyrighted.
There's the issue. But yeah, Marc Onimati about to start the final lap of this race. With 8.8 seconds to spare. A bit of a yellow flag for Ronan Hood, exiting no name. There in the far background, you can see Julian Chico. And there in the far background, exiting Lassus, that was Gok Polassa. Also with the little Steiner sticker on the rear right quarter panel on that Porsche 963. If you don't know, Steiner is the RENNSPORT mascot. With a very weird story behind it.
Stina. Yeah, you can see Stina in all of the radio checks. Or her sister.
That's very true. Maybe we should really make a plushie at some point. Or sell the plushie we have. Actually, Vladislav Pionkiewicz also just was in the pits for a final time. Just getting some new tires or something else, who knows?
Just fancied cleaning his car before the finish of the race.
But this race belongs to this man, Mark Onimachi. Took the strategy call nobody else did. And it definitely paid off for him. 7.2 seconds in the end, the margin. And if you think back, he came into the pits quite closely behind Julian Chico, so it was a very solid overcut, if you want to say it like that. But coming across the line, congratulations. What a victory here today from Mark Onimachi. And for Julian Chico, not too much of a gap in the end, but just not enough on those fresher tires. Coming home in second. Still congratulations to him.
No, it was a great race by Mark, and it was a brilliant strategy call. I think he's definitely given Julian and Rowan something to think about, maybe going into future hypercar races. Julian, great race by Julian as well, let's be honest. The great second place, and OG Stan getting second in the GT3s.
Yeah, everyone, what you really have to give to him was that opening stint was fantastic, as he's gonna finish side by side with his FDRT racing colleague there. The opening stint was fantastic. It was just with the strategy not working out for him, unfortunately. But still a podium position for him and finishing those 2 hours.
Yeah, for sure. I know Rowan was a bit of a last-minute decision to race as well, so perhaps not as practiced as he normally would be.
Definitely made a good job for that. But Kimi Hapler, he's gonna come home. Actually, it's the last car on track, I believe. Got Polassa just in front of him. But he will win GT3s, and it has been lights to flag. I mean, over a 2-hour race, that is very insane.
Yeah, it's ever a little wobble moment. He's had pretty perfect concentration going on there. His lap times have stayed good and consistent and fast most of the way through the race. Not really going too much above his best lap time. So he should be fairly pleased with that as a result.
Well, there we go. This finishes out the 2-hour Spa-Francorchamps event. The community event of today. And yeah, to close this one out, I think you can only say that a big congratulations to everyone who finished. Especially in the Hypercars, it hasn't been easy, but also in the GT3s. We haven't been focusing on them as much, but yeah, it has been a long race. I think both for the drivers and for us here in the booth as well.
That's true.
But I think we have some good takeaways from this race going forward. We didn't have an endurance event like this in quite a while. And with more endurance events coming in the following month, with, for example, the 2.4-hour race at the Nordschleife we've been talking about, yeah, we've seen consistency wins over raw pace, and that strategy is becoming a big topic in those races.
Yeah, for sure. I think it'll open up a conversation about strategies that maybe wasn't there before. And it could lead to some interesting things going forward.
Well, going forward, next week we will return with the RENNSPORT Community League at at Jeddah. The season opener of Season 6. Yes, indeed. So if you want to take part in those, you just need to build up a bit of safety rating, and then you are good to go and compete for the Season 6 championship. Season 5 saw the first champion that wasn't named Dominic Ladler. and it has become very competitive. So if you're looking for some competition, RCL is your way to go. And in 2 weeks, we will be back with the RENNSPORT Nordschleife League with GT3s and another RC, which we will communicate with you very soon on the Discord. So if you want to stay up and date, check out the Discord. Until then, have a great time, have a good week, and goodbye.
Goodbye.